Sean Diddy Combs was already sweating beneath the courtroom's fluorescent glare when the double doors groaned open and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson strode in. Not the swaggering box office colossus whose grin sells out theatres, but a man whose eyes looked like they'd been up all night bargaining with ghosts. The jury straightened, cameras banned from the room seemed to materialise in every spectator's gaze. Diddy's lawyers froze mid-whisper as the action star's boot heels clicked toward the stand, each step punctuating the mogul's unravelling composure. Johnson took a single breath that tremored clear to the back row, then spoke 12 words soft enough to make the ceiling fans falter. "I'm still afraid, but silence is worse than fear." Oxygen vanished. Reporters forgot their thumbs were on pause buttons. Diddy's trademark poker face cracked, a fleeting jaw twitch, a blink half a beat late, yet it felt like a seismic confession. The Rock's next sentence landed harder. He'd come to explain how a basement ritual killed something I can't get back, and why protecting that secret let an empire grow fangs. In one heartbeat, the trial mutated from star-studded spectacle to existential threat, not just for Combs but for every power broker who ever hosted a no-phones party in the hills. An unbreakable hero had broken, and the world was about to learn what it cost to glue him together. Johnson's decision to shatter 2 decades of carefully brokered quiet didn't just spike the courtroom's blood pressure, it detonated a legal minefield that could yank half of Hollywood into the blast radius. His on-record admission that "Diddy's blessing opened every door I ever walked through" converts rumour into a prosecutable timeline. Dates, phone calls, and back-channel favours now line up beside the federal trafficking counts like matching shell casings. Those once ironclad NDAs that studios brandish like crucifixes suddenly look unenforceable if the government deems them instruments of concealment. Brand lawyers took one glance at the live blog feed and flagged emergency clauses, sneaker mega deals, tequila equity. Even a family-friendly theme park partnership could vaporise the second Johnson's sworn words hit the docket. Worse for Combs, conspiracy statutes thrive on patterns, and The Rock just supplied prosecutors with a roadmap, from the first champagne-glossed party in 2001 to the last no-phones weekend in 2020, complete with witness lists, security firms, and private jet tail numbers. If the feds connect even 2 more testimonies to Johnson's story, they can argue a criminal enterprise, which upgrades potential prison time from nervy possibility to near certainty. Sponsors are already drafting apology posts, agents scour contracts for escape hatches, and every celebrity who's ever accepted a late-night invite from Combs is texting lawyers before bedtime. The trial's centre of gravity just shifted, from proving Diddy's guilt to counting how many co-stars he might take down with him. Back in 2001, fresh off the Scorpion King and still shaking sand from his wrestling boots, Johnson found himself orbiting Combs at a succession of invitation-only mixers that looked at first glance like any apex predator Hollywood party. Silk caftans, bottomless cristal, a Rolodex's worth of studio brass swapping shady promises over pool deck sushi. Combs played maitre d' to the dreamscape, gliding up with a grin and whispering, "Stick close, kid. Access is currency." Within weeks, The Rock's phone lit up with offers, a cameo rewritten overnight to a starring role, a stalled sponsorship magically green-lit, even the sudden disappearance of a rival action hero from a tentpole negotiating table. Grateful and a little dazzled, Johnson brushed aside the oddities. The compulsory phone drop at the door, the security guard noting arrival time, 2:13 a.m. The way every exit seemed to funnel back toward Combs's velvet-roped VIP. Then the tone shifted, tiny tests masquerading as jokes. A producer dared him to snort wasabi for the culture. A casting director hinted a role hinged on how deep you can bury a secret. And Combs himself began asking philosophical riddles about loyalty that felt more like binding contracts. Johnson's gut flickered red, but each new film gig or 7-figure brand deal tamped the alarm back down. By the time he realised the velvet rope was a leash, he was already tethered, success inked in favours, repayments scheduled at dark o'clock, and his silence cashed like collateral on every blockbuster that bore his name. The real turning point arrived in a text stamped 2:07 a.m. 6 words that felt innocuous enough to ignore until The Rock saw who'd sent them. House in the hills. Come alone. Map pin followed, nothing else. Adrenaline drowned out caution. By 2:30, he was creeping up a cobblestoned driveway flanked by statuary and infrared cameras. A valet wordlessly confiscated his phone and handed him a black silk mask for privacy. Inside, every chandelier was dimmed to a dusky glow, and the usual party chatter had been replaced by a hush thick enough to taste. Johnson waited 5 minutes, 10, until a side door opened and 5 men in identical charcoal suits filed past like synchronized bodyguards. Nobody spoke. Then the lights snapped off, and Combs's voice drifted from hidden speakers, soft as static. "Are you worthy? Are you ready?" The floor vibrated with a low-frequency beat that seemed to sync with Johnson's pulse. A sudden spotlight found him alone in the cavernous foyer, every exit cloaked in darkness. From somewhere behind, a hand pressed a chilled crystal tumbler into his palm. The liquid smelled sweet, yet metallic. "One sip," Combs whispered, materializing at the edge of the light, "and the gates stay open forever." Johnson's instinct screamed to bolt, but ambition, fresh, hungry, and flattered, glued his boots to the marble. Drink or leave. Legacy or limbo. In the silence that followed, the leash cinched tight enough to leave a scar. A week later, he found himself blindfolded again, this time ferried in silence to a mansion perched beyond the last streetlight of Mulholland. The blindfold came off in a windowless basement painted matte black, candles guttering in red glass votives that made the air wobble like fever. A semicircle of men in suits, studio heads, managers, a Grammy-winning producer, watched from leather chairs bolted to the floor. Combs stood at the centre, rolling up his sleeves with theatrical calm, then lifted a silver cloche to reveal a shallow steel dish holding a mound of pale, quivering flesh. "Loyalty, measured in humility," he murmured, handing Johnson a spoon so cold it burned. The Rock's knees threatened to buckle. Every wrestler's bone in his body screamed fight, yet every Hollywood contract inked on his behalf whispered submit. He asked if it was a joke. Nobody laughed. Phones recorded in silence from the shadows. Insurance, leverage, chains. Sweat stung his eyes as he dipped the spoon, tasted nothing but iron, and heard the room exhale in collective triumph. Laughter erupted, not jovial but predatory, pressing against his eardrums until humiliation eclipsed fear. Combs clapped twice and declared, "Welcome to the inner circle," sealing the ritual with a grin that promised privilege for silence. As Johnson staggered back into the night, he realised the price of his future blockbusters had already been deducted from his dignity, payable forever in quiet. The fallout hit faster than opening weekend box office numbers. Within days of the basement ritual, scripts that had languished in studio purgatory were fast-tracked with The Rock's name inked above the title. A stalled sneaker line resurfaced with a doubled advance, and an anonymous text assured him that "Premiere points are yours, just keep showing up." The message was clear: compliance pays, but so does hesitation, just in the opposite currency. The first time Johnson declined a 3 a.m. summons to Combs's Laguna hideaway, his agent rang at dawn, voice brittle. A tentpole sequel reshuffled its cast overnight, and Johnson was suddenly unavailable. Another refusal yanked him from a global billboard campaign 6 hours before the photo shoot, replaced by a lesser-known actor who'd attended every no-phones party that spring. The most sinister test came branded as a wellness retreat in the Mojave. Phones sealed in lockboxes, windows blacked out, attendees funneled into meditation rooms where a looped recording urged them to repeat, "Success is submission." Meals arrived erratically, sleep cycles blurred, and every door required a keycard held only by Combs's inner guard. Johnson lasted 48 hours before faking dehydration to escape, but the message stuck. One missed checkpoint could cost a franchise, a fragrance line, an entire persona. Each new blockbuster premiere felt less like a victory lap and more like a payment plan. Royalties traded for quiet, red carpet smiles stitched over a secret nobody would believe until he finally let it bleed in court. Sleepless nights stacked up like overdue call sheets, each one replaying that basement laughter until even Johnson's ultra-human discipline buckled. He started slipping into his home gym at 3 a.m, not to lift, but to drown the echo with clanging plates. When the noise failed, he folded onto the rubber floor and stared at the ceiling fan, counting rotations instead of sheep. A studio-mandated physician prescribed Ambien, yet the pills only stretched the nightmares into widescreen. Therapy became the fallback. Tuesday mornings in a discreet Brentwood office where the receptionist pretended not to recognize him. Across from a sand-coloured chaise, the psychologist asked what still hurt, and Johnson finally answered, the spoon, the laughter, the look in my own eyes when the mirror finally told the truth. He admitted he'd memorised every NDAS clause, convinced himself it was just Hollywood hazing, then watched younger actors vanish after refusing the same right. Guilt warped into panic whenever a new franchise was greenlit. He could feel the ritual's fingerprints on every million-dollar milestone. The therapist labelled it moral injury, noting how success built on silence corrodes from the inside out. Johnson scribbled the phrase onto a sticky note and kept it on his dashboard, a reminder that box office records could never outrun that basement. When Cassie Ventura's civil suit surfaced years later, the note resurfaced too, curling at the edges as if daring him to stay quiet. In that moment, Johnson chose confession over corrosion. When Johnson finally locked eyes with Combs across the wood-panelled arena of federal court, the room contracted to a duel no bailiff could break up. The prosecutor finished a question about involuntary compliance, but Johnson didn't answer right away. He turned his entire 6'4" frame toward the defense table and spoke to the man who once pulled his strings. "You don't own my life anymore." No flourish, just the flat truth, and somehow it thundered louder than any gavel. Combs's face, lacquered in courtroom composure all month, rippled at the edges, first a nostril flare, then a micro-frown, as though the words singed on entry. His lawyer objected. Non-responsive, argumentative. Yet even the judge let the moment breathe, sensing history wasn't finished writing itself. Johnson continued, voice riding the hush. He recalled the midnight summonses, the forfeited phone, the spoon that tasted of iron and shame. Each sentence stapled a new layer of context to the trafficking charges, transforming abstract allegations into a living timeline with witnesses who could corroborate everything from security cam timestamps to charter jet manifests. Jurors tracked every syllable like stock tips. One scribbled "spoon equals leverage" in the margin of her notebook. When cross-examination tried to frame the ritual as consensual absurdity, Johnson fired back, "Consent isn't a choice when the cost of no is obliteration." The line drew a gasp, a flurry of courtroom sketches, and the unmistakable sound of a castle wall beginning to crumble from the inside out. The aftershocks marched through Hollywood faster than opening weekend grosses. By dawn, Dior's fragrance microsite redirected to a bland under-maintenance page. Kirok's Instagram grid went dark, and a streaming giant quietly delisted Diddy's entire Essentials playlist while claiming metadata updates. Agents who once boasted of their Combs Rolodex set inbox filters to spam anything stamped bad boy. Junior publicists were ordered to scrub yacht photos they'd once posted as clout trophies. A veteran showrunner circulated a private memo titled Firewall Protocol, instructing writers' rooms to strip any lyrical references to the mogul before pilot delivery. Inside Combs's own orbit, fissures widened. A long-time bodyguard resigned mid-morning for family reasons. A studio fixer surfaced in prosecutors' hallways holding encrypted hard drives, and a hairstylist who'd attended 2 no-phones parties DM'd a reporter 3 words, "I kept receipts." Finance followed optics. A tech wearables SPAC yanked Combs from its board. Venture partners emailed ethics reviews, and a luxury hotel chain suspended his annual Las Vegas residency, citing guest safety priorities. Even rival moguls sensed the blood in the water. One discreetly offered prosecutors a deposition slot in exchange for limited immunity. By sunset, the empire that once sold aspiration in platinum and velvet looked radioactive, and every celebrity who'd ever toasted under its chandeliers began rehearsing the same line for public consumption. "I had no idea." History's paparazzi will replay the spectacle, but what lingers after the flashes fade is simpler. The price tag finally slid under the spotlight. Diddy's universe, gated mansions, matte black SUVs, contracts laced with fear, proves that an empire can survive scandals, settlements, even federal subpoenas, until one insider trades hush money for a heartbeat of conscience. Johnson's sworn rupture cracked the myth that power is permanent. He showed that influence without accountability isn't armor, it's a fuse. Now every velvet rope secret looks combustible, every non-disclosure reads like tinder, and the industry's old bargain, success demands silence, sounds less like wisdom and more like an overdue confession. Sponsors will spin, executives will stall, lawyers will bill by the hour, but none of them can reseal the jar once the oxygen of truth gets in. And for every performer scrolling these headlines from a gilded anxiety spiral, a new metric replaces box office receipts, the weight of what you're still swallowing to keep the credits rolling. Because the lesson echoing out of Courtroom 4B isn't about a single mogul's downfall, it's about how quickly a throne turns to an anvil the moment someone strong enough stops lifting it. Silence was the currency, until today, when the market crashed and the only stock left rising was testimony.